Welcome to the workshop, Master Your Memory and Mine with Jim Kwik.
Good morning. How many people here came here today to master their minds? How many people feel like your mind is not maybe what it could be? Raise your hand. I was having, last year I had the privilege and the honor of addressing Milken scholars, and at dinner, Michael Milken and I, we were talking about these forces, these digital forces that are kind of attacking our brains. Does anyone feel it? Like, how many people here feel like there's too much to learn, too little time? Anybody here have books on your shelf you haven't read yet? Anyone? And it becomes like shelf help, not self-help. Anyone here get more than 10 emails a day? And how many people came here today like to have a better memory? How many people forgot why you came here today? Have you ever done that, by the way? Have you ever walked into a room of your own home and just forgot why you're there? Does anybody feel absent-minded? Like, I don't know, you're taking a shower and you can't remember if you shampooed your hair or not, and you end up doing it twice. Or you read a page. How many people have ever read a page in a book, got to the end, and just forgot what you just read? Right? Or you misplace things like your wallet, your purse, your cell phone, your car keys, or if not your car keys, something much larger like your car. You ever see the people in the parking lot using their car alarm like a GPS, trying to figure out where they parked until they realize they took like Lyft or Uber or something like that? And how many people here have trouble remembering people's names? Have you ever met somebody, you get their name, and then seconds later the name just disappears out of your mind? Or if it's not a short-term issue, it could be more of a long-term issue. Like you're just out about, somebody taps you on your shoulder, you turn around and you see somebody you recognize, but for the life of you, you don't remember what? The person's name. And what makes it worse is when that person has the nerve to remember your name, right? And it gets really, really awkward. Or you're talking to somebody at this event, and somebody comes up, and you know this person, but you have to introduce two people, and you don't know one or both of their names, and it gets very tricky, right? So these are the kind of things that I want to talk to you about this morning. I want to show you very practical tips, techniques, brain hacks, if you will, to be able to jumpstart your mind so you can learn anything faster, so you can achieve more, save time, and really have the peace of mind that you desire and that you really deserve. And so how many people, actually, what I really want to do is I want to make this session so valuable to you, it was worth the entire tuition and trip out here for your entire 4 days here at Milken. How many people are up for that kind of experience here? And I appreciate it because it's not because I'm so great, it's really because you are so great. You have the most advanced supercomputer wealth-creating device on the planet, which is what? Right, your brain. You know, this between your ears, this 3-pound gray matter. The challenge is it doesn't come with an owner's manual, and it's not always user-friendly. And so those are the kind of things that I want to talk to you about, and we're going to go through a lot of strategies. So you want to take a number of notes. I'm going to give you tips. Now, by the way, just because this is more of an intimate group here, and I have 0 slides to be able to share with you, so this is not pre-rehearsed. I want to be able to serve you. So what got you up a little bit early today? If I was a genie and I could snap my fingers and help you with one issue when it comes to these ideas of focus or your habits or your ability to read or your ability to process information, your memory, your brain health, what brings you here? What would be a big win if we could cover that today? Just out of curiosity. Focus. How many people here have issue focusing and concentrating, and you're just multitasking all the time, right? You're going from one thing to another. Now, actually, the research is very definitive about this, saying that, how many people here multitask? So the research is saying that you actually aren't capable of multitasking, doing 2 or more cognitive activities at once. Certainly, you could walk and chew gum and have a conversation, but not 2 thinking activities. And in actuality, what you're doing, they call it, more accurate description is called task switching. You're going from one task to another. And the challenge is there's a cost there, that every single time you switch from one task to another, you lose time. Number one, it takes anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes to regain your focus and what they call your flow. Some of you have done the study in terms of the science of flow states. But the other thing is they did a lot of studies with doctors, medical doctors, and also when people are doing more, trying to do two cognitive activities at once, multitask, if you will, they make more errors and mistakes also as well. So there's a big cost to multitasking. So focus is a big issue in a world of distraction. What else? Names. How many people would it be valuable to share ideas and strategies on how to remember names? Remembering names important, by the way, in business? A little bit or a lot? A lot, right? What's the message we send to somebody when we forget their name? That we don't care, right? That they're not important. Now, is that true? Is it true? No, but how are you going to show somebody you're going to care for their business, their future, their finances, their family, whatever it is you have to offer them if you don't just care enough to remember what? Their name, right? Because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you what? Until you care, right? And before you sell anything, you sell yourself, and nothing sells like sincere interest in somebody. So we'll definitely cover names. So focus, names. What would be a third thing that would be very useful? How to transition from one thing. How many people because nowadays it's really, the only constant nowadays is change, right? So that's the only thing that you can count on. I do get to work with a lot of universities and these students. I read recently that somebody graduating and going into the workforce is expected to have anywhere from 10 to 14 different careers. Careers, not jobs, but different careers because the world is changing so quickly, right? And so I believe that there are three forces that are holding you back, professionally and personally. And these are ones that generations before didn't have to deal with like it is now. And so it's the first one, these are digital forces. Number one is digital overload, right? Does everyone feel like more overloaded than ever? The amount of information is doubling at dizzying speeds. I was doing a program and I heard that the chairman of Google said this. He said, the amount of information that's been created from the dawn of humanity, since humans walked this planet, to the year 2003, which is what, about a decade and a half ago? Think about all that knowledge, all that data. How long does that take to create in today's stage? That amount of information. I heard it somewhere. 2 days. 48 hours. Great. Think about all the blogs, the podcasts, the websites, the journals of practice, all the books, newspapers, everything. So we're in this information economy, right? Where knowledge is not only power, knowledge is profit. Right? The faster you can learn, the faster you could earn. But I'm not just talking financial profit. That's obvious because nobody here is paid for their brute strength, right? You're paid for your brain strength. You're not paid for your muscle power. You're paid for your mind power. But the challenge is school was a great place to learn what to learn, math, history, science, Spanish. But how many classes were there on how to learn? How many classes were there on critical thinking, how to study, how to read faster, how to focus, how to concentrate, how to have better attention, how to problem solve, how to remember things. I always thought it was interesting that it should have been the fourth R in school, right? You have 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, but what about remembering? What about retention? What about recall? And so really what we're talking about is the area of meta-learning, learning how to learn. I think if there's one skill to master in the 21st century, it's your ability to learn faster, to read faster, to focus quicker, right? And those are the things we're talking about. So number one, digital overload. The second supervillain, I would say, in today's economy that's holding you and your teams back is digital distraction, right? Focus. In a world and one of the biggest challenges, we're so tied to our smart devices, right? And actually, I'll tell you one of the worst habits. I find that the most successful people, they have to-do lists. How many people here have a to-do list? Things that you need to accomplish, tasks and such. And also, some of the most successful people, the elite mental performers, they have a not-to-do list. A not-to-do list. These are their non-negotiables, the things that they will not do. Because if you're stressed, if you're overloaded, if you're overwhelmed, some of it's not your fault because it's the world we live in, but other parts is we're overcommitting to things. How many people are guilty of this? You say yes way too much. And what's the phrase? You say no to good, so you say yes to what? To great, right? And it's like having too many windows open on your browser, on your laptop, if you will, and it still takes up energy, even if it's minimized. So every time you say yes to something, it's hard because you're splitting your focus. Right? The word, even the word priorities, it's only been plural, like multiples, just the past few decades. Before it was like your priority. It was like there's like one thing. This is your primary thing. But now everything's important. The challenge is, it's kind of like How many people like use a highlighter when they read books, like business books and stuff like that? How many people tend to over-highlight a little bit? And the book glows in the dark. There's so much, because if everything is important, then nothing is important. And going back to this, having a not to-do list, one of the things, and you're gonna not like me for saying this, but as your brain coach, if you will, people have a coach, right? How many people here have like a business coach, a financial coach, a health coach, a personal trainer and such? So I wanna be, just over the next hour, your brain coach. And I don't wanna just tell you what you wanna hear, I wanna tell you what you need to hear. And one of the worst habits, and I believe that first you create your habits, and then your habits create you. Right? First you create your habits of meditation and journaling and reading each day and doing the things that are important for you, and then your habits create you back, right? But one of the worst habits for high performance is checking your phone first thing in the morning. Raise your hand if this is something that you do, honestly. And I'll tell you why, and I'm gonna go into the training, but this is, if you walk out with anything out of this could be your big takeaway, if you will, is because when you wake up in the morning, you're in this very suggestible state. There are 4 primary brainwave states, into the frequency, if you will, of how your brain operates. Beta is which you're all in now, you're awake. Delta is when you're asleep. Those 2 states in between, theta and alpha, are extremely important in the area of learning. So theta is the state that you're in right when you wake up in the morning. And it's the state of, I call it the state of creativity. And you know what actually puts you in this state? Showers. How many people notice when you're taking a shower, you come up with some of your best ideas? Right? I took 5 showers this morning just to prepare for you guys. But you have all these ideas, and it's always where you can't write something down, right? So I'm gonna teach you a technique today on how to boost your memory by, I train a lot of actors here in Hollywood, how to memorize their scripts, speed read their lines and everything else like that. And a lot of TED speakers, I teach them how to give presentations without referring to notes or teleprompters or PowerPoint presentations and so on. How many people here every so often have to give a public presentation in front of a group of people or on media and video and such? So would that be a useful thing to also cover besides focus and remembering names? Be able to do that, switch tasks, be able to give a speech without notes. So I'll share with you how to be able to do that effectively in minutes, literally in minutes, instead of the old rote way of learning. And so going back to your phone, this the reason why you don't want to pick up your phone first thing in the morning is you go through you're in delta, which is sleep. Theta is when you kind of wake up, you're most creative. The alpha state between beta when you're awake, alpha state is a state of relaxed awareness. And this is the state that you go into when we publish online programs, right? We have students in over 180 countries, online 30-day speed reading course, 30-day memory course, 30-day focus program, academic success, and so on. And so we have a lot of data. And what we find is when it comes to learning, we train, a big demand is teaching people how to learn other languages. Right? How many people would like to learn a second or third or fourth language? And one of the ways we can improve language learning 300% is by putting people into an alpha state. And the alpha state, brainwave state, is a state of relaxed awareness. And this is relaxed awareness, it's the state you go into when you meditate. Really good hypnotherapist could put you into an alpha state, and that's why hypnotherapy works in certain circumstances, because it's where your critical mind is set aside and you just absorb information. So it's kind of like, for example, in hypnotherapy, let's say your critical mind is not squelching your ideas and kind of critically examining things, and you accept I'm a non-smoker. Right? I have focus, I learn quickly and effectively, I have a wonderful memory, and you're more likely to adopt those beliefs, right? But another thing that puts you in alpha state is actually television. Television programming, which is an interesting word, programming, but have you ever been in a room with somebody and they're watching television so intently, and you're trying to talk to them and have a conversation with them, but they just don't hear you? Because they're in a trance, if you will. They're in an alpha state, and information is just flowing in, uninhibited by their critical mind. And so you could actually learn languages, learn facts, learn presentations faster by putting yourself into an alpha state. Now, when you wake up in the morning, that first hour of the day, you're in these theta alpha states, you're highly suggestible. And the reason why I say don't pick up your phone first thing in the morning is because it trains you. It literally rewires your brain to do 2 things. Number one, it trains you to be distracted. right? And so every single time you get a like, a share, a comment, you watch a cat video, whatever it is, you get a dopamine flood, and it goes along the reward center of your nervous system, the learning motivation centers, and it literally makes it more habitual, more addictive. We have a podcast, which I highly recommend everyone listen to. It's only 10, 15 minutes long. And in it, I teach people how to remember names, how to give a speech without notes, how to read a book a week, how to change your habits, and so on. And there's no advertising or anything on there. There's nothing that's sold. You can just search my name on your podcast app for you and your team on your phone. But we did 2 episodes specifically on creating habits. And I interviewed a friend of mine, Dr. B.J. Fogg. And he's out of Stanford University. He runs the Influence Persuasion Lab there. And actually, one of his students co-founded Instagram. All right. Now, the average person, how many people are on Instagram, just out of curiosity? Raise your hand. The average person opens Instagram 150 times a day. And if you're not doing it 150 times, that means somebody else is doing it way, way more, right? Which is scary. But that's a habit, right? Because every single time you see a red like or notification, you have to be able to do that. One of the ways to change that impulse, actually, is putting your phone on grayscale. Because when you take the color out of it, it takes that urge out of it also as well. Kind of like what it does in your mind when you do that with food. Like you really want that chocolate cake. And in your mind, if you just change in your mind, just pretend it's like a grayscale, if you will, it lowers the urge or the motivation. So we did this whole thing on habits, and you should listen to those 2 episodes. They're extraordinary. But the reason why I bring this up specifically is when you're in this alpha state, you're picking up your phone, you're training your brain to be distracted, and you wonder why you can't focus and read. And they say that the average person now has less of attention span than a what? A goldfish, right? And because our mind is actually everywhere and it can't focus, and part of the reasons is this second enemy. Do we have digital overload? Digital distraction. Never before have we been more distracted. And how do you maintain your concentration and focus? How do you get things done when your attention's going here and there and you can't focus? In fact, when you're reading, how many people, when you read, your mind wanders? And it gets easily distracted. That's a big challenge. So we're going to be able to cover that. But the second reason you don't pick up your phone first thing in the morning on your not to-do list, picking up your phone, not only does it train you to be distracted, but number 2, it trains you to be reactive. Does that make sense? Meaning that you're here because you're extraordinary. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, right? And especially here because you self-selected to be specifically in this room at this time to learn about how to master your mind. So you're already unbelievably successful. The challenge is what holds us back is always reacting and responding to everyone else's stuff. And when you wake up in the morning, you're highly suggestible, and you pick up your phone, and you look at text messages and check your voicemail, and you look at email messages. How many people have ever gotten a really bad, like an email that just threw off your whole day, put you in a bad mood? And that's why you don't want to pick up your phone when you're highly suggestible, because all it takes, I have a friend named Brendan. He says, your inbox is nothing but a convenient organizational system for other people's agenda for your life. Does that make sense? Like, how are you going to build an extraordinary life, be an extraordinary leader, if the first thing you're doing is reacting to everyone else's stuff, right? And so for me, I wake up, and yes, I have hundreds of things on my to-do list, but I have 3 things I need to thrive personally and 3 things I need to thrive professionally. And that's literally it. And usually what I do, how many people are familiar with Pareto's principle? The 80-20 rule? That you focus on 20%, that gives you 80% of the results. In all business and all health, there are 20% of your customers give you 80% of the revenue, right? On the opposite side, 20% of your clients give you 80% of the headaches, right? But you can see how that works out. 20% of the things you do for your health give you 80% of the results. So when I'm making my to-do list, I'm thinking about the head dominoes. You know, the first ones that often when I could hit it, it takes care of other things. But I have 3 things personally, 3 things professionally, and I don't check my messages until I get one of those things done. Does that make sense? Because you want to be a thermostat, you don't want to be a thermometer. Does that make sense? Like, what's the primary function of a thermometer? It just reacts to the environment. That's what a thermometer does. It just literally reflects what the environment is giving it. So it has no say, it has no cause, or it has no power or control or influence. It just reacts. But what's a thermostat do? It regulates. It sets a goal. It sets a temperature. It sets a vision. What happens to the environment? It rises and raises to be able to be at that level. So you want to be a thermostat because you have that responsibility. And so when you check your phone first thing in the morning, you give up that sovereignty and that power to something else, right? And so how can you build a quality life, a quality enterprise, business, politics, whatever field that you're in? if you're just responding to things, right? So that's the second enemy. So number one, digital overload. Number two, digital distraction. And the third thing I want to cover today is, people have mentioned this all over the past few days, is forgetfulness. And I call it digital dementia. And this is actually a medical term, digital dementia. And this is the idea where we're outsourcing our brains to our smart devices. And our smart devices are doing everything for us, right? It's keeping our calendar. It's keeping our to-do list. It's doing simple math. I was out the other day. It was 10 of us. And at the end, the bill came, and then it was 10 of us again. And 3 people took out their phones to divide by 10. Right? And you laugh, but odds are somebody in here would be doing that, right? And so we're so dependent on our smart devices. And here's the truth. Your brain is like a muscle, and it's use it or lose it. But we're not using it in ways that we've used it before, so it's doing all the work for us. So that's what's creating digital dementia. They're saying GPS, for example. I just did a training for the Cleveland Clinic for a Center for Brain Health. I trained their doctors, their staff, their caregivers, their patients on how to prevent brain aging and all in these challenges. My grandmother passed away of Alzheimer's, so this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And so, but one of the challenges when it comes to relying on smart devices is like GPS. If you're dependent on this thing to tell you when and where to turn, you're not realizing when you would have a memory lapse, so you're not going to the doctors to get checked out. So you're not getting early detection of brain aging ailments like dementia and such. So these are the challenges, right? And by the way, like when I'm talking about your phone, how many phone numbers did you know growing up? Honestly, how many phone numbers? Like all of them, right? Hundreds of phone numbers. How many phone numbers do you remember right now? 2, right? And you're like, Jim, I don't want to memorize 500 phone numbers, and neither do I. But we've lost the ability to remember 1, right? So that's concerning, right? You forget a password, or what your hotel room number is, right? And that's not normal. It's because we've grown so dependent and codependent on our smart devices. Our smart devices are making us not so smart. Does that make sense? So digital overload, digital distraction, and digital dementia. And the reason why I bring these up is the first step to creating change and transformation is awareness, because you can't change something that you don't know it's a problem. But if you're under stress, if you feel overloaded, if you feel like you're losing your memory, it's not your fault. We just live in this digital economy. And is it going to get any easier? No, the amount of information is doubling at dizzying speeds, but how we learn it, how we retain it, how we study it, focus, is that increased at all? So that growing gap creates what? Stress, right? They call it information anxiety. Higher blood pressure, compression of leisure time, more sleeplessness. How many people here, honestly, you're not getting the sleep that you really need? And that's so critical. How do you feel when you only get an hour, 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep? How do you feel the next day? How's your brain? Does it thrive? How's your ability to solve problems, your ability to focus, your ability to be able to process, your mental acuity, your temperament, right? And people suffer from this, what they call decision fatigue. And this is a real thing, decision fatigue. You wonder why. How many people have ever been at dinner? You've had such a long day. You're at dinner, you're looking at the menu, and you honestly can't decide what you want for dinner. You can't make that simple decision because decision fatigue basically states that you can only make a finite amount of good decisions in a day. And then after that, you tank, right? And that's why I did a video interview. It has millions and millions of views in just like a couple of weeks. It's all about how some leaders routine their life. So for example, like Tony Hsieh or Mark Zuckerberg, how they wear the same sweatshirt or the same t-shirt, all the time. It's because they don't want to waste one of their decisions on what am I going to wear today or what am I going to eat today, right? Because it's finite. So it's very sacred, and they protect that. So, but how many people feel like you fatigue when you're reading something? Your eyes get tired, or you get mentally exhausted. Anyone suffer from like brain fog? Right? And so these are the challenges. So what I want to do right now is go into the tactics. Right? Now that we describe what the problem set is right now, what do you do about this? Well, the good news is that your brain, only 1/3 of your memory, your brain's potential, is predetermined by genetics and biology. And this is well accepted, 1/3. So people say, well, it's my age, my background, my career, my education, my financial situation, gender, personal history, IQ. That doesn't matter as much as the other 2/3, which is completely in your control. So I'm going to share with you some of the things the research suggests that's going to amplify that 2/3 so you get the most out of it. And the other thing is here, when it comes to memory, I believe this, that there's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's just a trained memory and an untrained memory. There's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There's a trained memory and an untrained memory. So here, let me jump right into this. I'm going to cover memory and remembering names really quickly. Ready? So sit the way you'd be sitting if you're really interested in what I was saying right now, that you're really Now, why do you even have to move? So because I'm going to give you a big download right now. There are 3 keys to improving your memory. 3 keys. M-O-M, remember mom. I'm going to give you a bunch of acronyms because I'm going to go through this really fast, quick, if you will. Speaking about names, my name is Jim Kwik of Kwik Learning, and I help people learn quickly. I didn't change it to do what I do. It's my father's name, my grandfather's name. With a name like Kwik, you can say my life and my destiny was pretty much planned out. I had to be a runner back in school, which is a lot of pressure when it says Kwik right on your shirt. I have to be very careful when I'm driving because the worst name to have on your driver's license when you get pulled over for speeding is the name Kwik, because you're not going to talk your way out of that speeding ticket. And I get to do my mission in life, my life's purpose, which is helping people to learn faster. I feel the biggest challenge we have, if you're stressed and overloaded, distracted, you feel like you lose your memory, I feel like it's not your fault. It's we all grew up with a 20th century education, and a 20th century education was designed for a 20th century world. But, I get to train some elite minds here, people like Elon Musk and the engineers at SpaceX, and, like they're building worlds of, full of electric cars and spaceships that are going to Mars. But the vehicle of choice we choose when it comes to education or learning is like a horse and buggy. Does anyone feel that like that? And so, like they say, and this is not a slight against teachers. I grew up with learning disabilities. I had a head injury when I was a child. I was 5 years old, had a very bad accident, and I was put in special classes. And at the age of 9, a teacher actually pointed to me and said, "That's the boy with the broken brain." And it's crazy. How many people here have kids? You have to be very careful because your external words become their internal words, right? Their self-talk, and you have to be very protective of your own self-talk and the talks of your kids. So every time I did something bad or I didn't measure up, which was all the time, I was like, oh, I just have a broken brain. And here's what I realized, that every time you say, I have a bad memory, or I'm just too old, or this runs in my family, what happens is when you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them. You know what I mean? When you argue for your limits, you get to keep them. They're yours. So that self-talk plays a big role. And so I grew up with these learning difficulties, and when I was 18, I was able to compensate, and I learned different ways to be able to do it. Now I teach that because that's my personal mission. But going back to memory, the 3 keys are M-O-M. So let's say, let's take names, okay? Raise your hand if you want to be better with names. Okay, watch this. Let's say that there's a suitcase here of $1 million cash for you or your favorite charity, tax-free. You just walk home with it. If you just remember the name of the first stranger you meet in this room, raise your hand if you're going to remember that person's name for $1 million. Now, how come you're all like memory experts all of a sudden? Because the truth is, as your memory coach, I'm going to call you on your stuff, is you have a great memory already. Right? Like, what technique did you use? You didn't use any memory technique, right? What changed? Your motivation. So the M in mom stands for motivation. And that's you tapping into your drive of why you want to remember something, right? So, for example, when I meet somebody for the first time, I ask myself, why do I want to remember this person's name, for instance? Right? Maybe it's to show the person respect. Maybe it's to create a new friend. Maybe it's to do some business with them. Maybe it's to practice these techniques I learned from Jim, right? Because here's what you want to always remember. Reasons reap results. Reasons reap results. Because, here, in business, people don't buy logically, right? They buy what? Emotionally, right? Because we're not logical, we are biological. And I believe there's a success formula, 3 steps. I call it H cubed. To achieve anything that you want with your business, with your life, 3 steps, H cubed. Head, heart, hands. Head, heart, hands. Here's the thing though, you could visualize goals in your head, you could affirm and have vision boards and imagine this amazing, you set your KPIs and everything that you have in your head, but if you're not acting with your hands, how many people have ever procrastinated? How many people have ever put things off? Self-sabotage, right? If you're not acting with your hands, what I would check in with is the second H, your heart, which is symbolized as what? The emotions, the feelings, right? Because that's what gets us to do things. I did a whole episode on our podcast on how to overcome procrastination. 5 scientifically proven ways to overcome procrastination, literally just to smash them. But the underlying drive is really understanding why you do things. One of my favorite books is called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. You always want to be able to tap into your why, because reasons reap results. So ask yourself, why do you want to remember this person's name? And it's common sense. And you could say, like, oh, that's common sense. But here's the thing. Common sense is not common practice. How many people know it? There's a lot of things that are common sense that people don't put into practice. Because I believe it's a myth and it's a lie that knowledge is power. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge is only potential power. It only becomes power when what? When you use it, when you apply it, right? So tap into the heart. The O in mom, let's see, pay attention here. Just shake out your hand. Shake out your right hand. Do this. Can everyone see me? Everyone shake out your right hand. Make a fist. Put it to your chin. Now, come on, where's your chin? Now, why does 90% of the room put it to their cheek, right? The O in mom stands for observation. I mean, can we talk here? A lot of people, when they forget names, they blame their retention. It's not your retention, it's your attention. The art of memory is the art of attention. The art of memory is the art of attention. Recently, I went to a fundraiser. It was like 2,000 people. I go to my assigned table. I sit down there. I'm the first one there. And I'm going to paint this picture. And I'm going to mention names. And the reason why I mention these names specifically is if I talk about, you know, Bill Smith, some people can't really picture that. But if I talk about Will Smith or somebody that I have the opportunity to work with, kind of puts a picture in your mind, right? Also, when you see them in movies, it'll remind you of the lesson, okay? So I'm sitting down there, first one at the table, and right next to me sits Forrest Whitaker. I'm a big Forrest Whitaker fan. Richard Branson, Ashton Kutcher, Ashton's twin brother, who I didn't realize he had a twin brother, and then 20 minutes into dinner, Bill Clinton sits right next to me. And I had met him before just once, very, very briefly. What blew my mind is he remembered my name. And I was in shock, right? Because it wasn't a long conversation. And then he remembered our last conversation. And I was blown away, because how many people, regardless of your political ideology, believes that President Clinton is a great connector, communicator, right? Charisma, right? And he has how many people know he has an incredible memory also as well, right? And he has a powerful, powerful presence. But I noticed when I'm talking to him, I was asking him, what memory technique are you using? And I just have to know. And he's like, Jim, he tells me these stories about his grandfather in Arkansas and getting the kids around in the living room and telling these elaborate stories. But afterwards, he would actually ask them and quiz them to see if they're really paying attention, right? I believe questions are the answer, especially in our business. For reading, a lot of people don't get reading comprehension. I feel like you're not asking enough questions. I think the key to innovation, creativity, are asking new questions. There's a great book called The Structure of Scientific Revolution that basically says all innovation, automotive, fashion, technology, usually comes from somebody outside the industry, because it takes somebody from the outside that didn't grow up with the same limitations and blinders, saying, hey, why aren't, like Elon Musk looking at automotive saying, hey, why aren't you doing it this way, right? So they ask a new question, you get new answers, right? And so going back here, I'm asking these questions, and I noticed that something uneery is like, President Clinton's like looking right at me. And there's like 2,000 people in the room, a lot more important people, especially at that table, but it's like I'm the only one that's there, right? And I noticed that I think his incredible memory and his powerful presence comes from being powerfully present. Does that make sense? That his incredible memory and his powerful presence with people comes from being powerfully present with people. But how often are we doing that at gatherings like this, right? You come to these events for 2 reasons, I assume. You come here for, number 1, for the content. How many people have gotten some insight or ideas over the past few days, right? But the challenge is when it comes to your learning and memory is within 48 hours, 80% of it, they call it the forgetting curve, is gone. How many people know this? You go to school and you didn't study, you crammed the night before, and then the next morning, nobody could talk to you because you don't want anything to spill out. and at breakfast, and you can't wait to take the test, and after you take the test, what happens? What happens to the information? It's like gone, right? That's the forgetting curve. 80% of what you learn is gone within 48 hours. So you come to a great event, and then 48 hours, you learn some really important things, you lose most of it. But the other reason you come to gatherings like this is not just for the content, it's for the connections, right? The people, it's the individuals, the ideas and the individuals. But you go there and then you forget the people, right? And you forget their names, and you forget information about them, you forget the conversations, and that's why this is so important. Right? I'm going to give you a number of resources on just when you're done here, free resources online, so you can be able to fix these things for yourself and your team. Because human capital, just like with the video introduction with Michael, is saying that human capital, that's the biggest line item there is, right? Like for example, I do the whole thing on speed reading, and tomorrow I'm doing a live speed reading webinar, like master class for everybody, and there's not just for people to be able to join. And on average, we improve reading speed 300%. But let's say we even double your reading speed. The average person in this room spends about, how much time do you think you spend a day processing information? Processing. Think about all the emails, texts, websites, prospectus, business plans, books, newspapers, news. About 4 or 5 hours, is that fair? Half of your day is spent reading. Like that means, by the way, for those, raise your hand if you have a team, people that work for you, right? That means half of their salary is being paid to read. And if you could just double your reading speed, you save 2 hours a day. What's 2 hours a day over the course of a year? Sorry, that's a lot of math in the morning. Well, let's say you save 1 hour a day. 1 hour a day. What's 1 hour a day over the course of a year? 365 hours. Now, that's a large number. How many 40-hour work weeks is that? 9? No, more than 9? 2 months of productivity you saving 1 hour a day in something ubiquitous like reading. And so this is what we're talking about here. The O stands for observation. And when I say when you're at this event, meeting great individuals, a lot of people, they're not really meeting them. They're looking over their shoulders. How many people are guilty of looking around the room, seeing who's more important in the room and such, right? Or if you're not distracting yourself externally, you're distracting yourselves internally. Because really what you're doing, you're not really listening. If you're honest with yourself, you're waiting for your turn to talk. Or you're thinking about how you're going to respond. And one of my very favorite books was a mentor of mine, written by a mentor of mine, Dr. Stephen Covey. He wrote the book what? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, a must-read book, right? These are the 7 habits of the most effective people, and down to 7. By the way, the 7th habit is what we're talking about here. It's called Sharpen the Saw. That if you have all this wood to cut, which you do, metaphoric wood, like think about your to-do list, all the tasks and projects. You have all this wood to cut, and you have a saw, but it has a dull blade. When's the best time to sharpen that saw? In the beginning, middle, or end? In the beginning, right? Because if you do it at the end, what's going to happen? That means you waste time, you waste energy, you suffer, you struggle. But a lot of people are doing that with their learning. And so sharpen the saw in the beginning, everything after that becomes easier, right? Again, that's why I say if there's one skill to master in the 21st century where the world's changing and you don't know where the world's going to be 5 years from now, it's your ability to learn. So then you can learn, outthink, outlearn, outfocus, outperform everyone in your peers, in your competition and such. So that's what we were talking about. But one of the other habits besides sharpen the saw is seek first to understand, then to be understood. That one of the keys to human connection is seek first to understand the person, then to be understood, right? But so many people want to get out what they want to get out without really listening. And most people feel like they're not even heard or recognized. But the sweetest sound to a person's ears is their name. Sweetest sound to a person's ears is their name. That's why listening for their name is so important. In fact, write down the word listen. Write down the word listen right now. And then scramble the letters. This is a brain exercise. What word does it spell perfectly? Shout it out. Silent. Silent, right? And so that's all I'm saying is when you meet somebody for the first time, you can remember their name. It's one word. You have this incredible supercomputer of a brain, right? But you're not listening for it, right? And so all I'm asking you to do with the M is motivation, the O is observation, which is really just being a good human being, right? Motivation is caring about the person enough to listen to them. The O is just being present with them and just paying attention to them. And then the final M in MOM stands for mechanics, the mechanics. And I don't mean the person that fixes your car. I mean the tools, the techniques, the strategies on how to do that. The 3 steps on how to learn another language, steps on how to read faster. But not just read faster, the keys on how to comprehend more when you're reading, right? The step-by-step on how to give a speech without referring to notes. But I do believe that 80% of success is mindset. 80% of success comes down to psychology. It's more of an inner game. And you already have what it takes to be here, because for me, it's just showing up and then playing full out, right? Because most people don't show up here. And the other part is when you're here, you have to do the work, right? And play full out. Who are the fastest learners on the planet? Children, right? I did this to a group of 10,000 people from 60 countries. And I was like, who are the fastest learners on the planet? A whole table right here yelled out pygmies. And if you know why, please tell me why pygmies are such fast learners. But children, right? How fast can a child learn a musical instrument compared to an adult? How fast can a child learn another language compared to an adult? They learn really fast, but they have lots of questions, and they have this sense of wonder, and they play all the time, right? And here's the thing. People are like, well, I stopped playing because I grow older. And I don't think that's the case. I feel like you grow older because you stop playing, right? And so that's the difference that makes the difference. And so going back to the mechanics, let me give you a couple steps on how to learn anything faster. This will help with your focus that people ask about. I want you to remember this. Be fast. B-E-F-A-S-T. You want to be fast. Another acronym. So the B stands for believe. Believe. Because if you believe you can or believe you can't, either way, what? You're right. Who said that? Henry Ford said that, right? If you believe you can or believe you can't, either way, you're right. But what does belief have to do with human learning? What does it have to do with human achievement? Let me show you. Let's stand up real quick. Stand up. Make arm-length distance. Move around a little bit. Make arm-length distance from the person next to you. Make arm-length distance. So spread out a little bit. So if you just did like a helicopter, you can't touch anything. All right, let me show you what a belief is. Put your arms down by your side. Jump up and down. Shake out your body. Okay, stop. Now notice where your feet are. Keep it stationary. And what I want you to do is with your right hand, point forward with your right hand. With your other right hand, sir. Okay, very good. Now, without moving your feet, I want you to move clockwise to your right as far as you go comfortably. And notice where you're pointing. Notice how far you can go, and notice the point where you're pointing exactly. Notice the exact point. Come back center. Put your arms down by your side. Take a deep breath. Exhale and close your eyes. We're going to do a quick visualization exercise. Now, with your eyes closed, with your arms by your side, I want you to imagine you're raising your arm again, but this time see and feel yourself turning twice as far as you did the first time. Like really fun. See and feel yourself turning twice as far as you did the first time. Like you're made out of rubber, getting a great stretch. And again, with your eyes closed, I want you to imagine yourself turning 3 times around. What would that feel like? Imagine that. And even if you can't imagine it, imagine you can imagine it. And you're going 3 times around. And then one more time with a smile on your face, thinking, what does this have to do with focus and memory? With a big smile on your face, see and feel yourself turning 4 times around, like you're Gumby. 4 times around. Best stretch of your life. All right, now watch this. Open your eyes. Point forward with your right hand. And turn to your right as far as you can now go. Now clap if you went further the second time. Have a seat, have a seat. Now here's the magic question that I'm going to ask you right now. Were you physically capable of turning that far the first time? Like nobody took a yoga class when my eyes were closed, right? Yes, you were physically capable. Where was the limitation? In your mind, right? And you're like, Jim, I didn't have a belief on how far I could turn. How many beliefs do you think you have? A lot, right? A lot of beliefs. They say the average person has about 60,000 thoughts a day. 60,000 thoughts a day. But the problem is 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts they had yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that, right? But we have beliefs. Now, what does it have to do with memory, reading, focus, all these things? All behavior is belief-driven. All behavior is belief-driven. I believe that there's a syntax to success. It goes be, do, have, share. Be, do, have, share, in that order, right? Because you could have a phone number and reverse numbers and you won't get the same result, right? Be, do, have, share. And so, but the problem is people, if they get shortcutted, let's say they get to the have part and they win the lottery or something like that, what happens, what is proven to happen after someone wins the lottery over X amount of years? They lose it all and more, right? Because they have millions of dollars, but at the B level, they were never being a millionaire. Does that make sense? Because all behavior is belief driven. In order to do something, you need to believe that you have the potential to be able to do that. So here, this turning exercise is interesting because, see, business people use visualization. What do athletes do? Do they just do physical exercise? They do what? Mental, right? Visual. So here's an example. What did Roger Bannister do in 1954? He broke the 4-minute mile. Throughout human history, nobody could run a mile in less than 4 minutes. What was interesting, though, if you look back, he was able to do it because he didn't just do physical training. He would actually visualize himself looking at the clock, and the clock says 3:59, 3 minutes, 59 seconds, because he knew it had to happen here before it happened there, because he's a thermostat, right? Because so that was interesting, right? Success is an inside-out process. But what I found more interesting was what happened after that. Nobody could do it throughout human history. One person does it. What happened over the next few years? Dozens of people started breaking a 4-minute mile. Now, let me ask you a question. Were there big advancements in training methodology, nutrition, shoe technology? Where was the change? A change in the mind, a change in the belief, right? Because you know what the belief was back then that was widely accepted? Not only was it impossible, it's just the human heart couldn't sustain a sub 4-minute mile and it would explode in your chest, right? That was the belief. Would that keep you from running a sub 4-minute mile? I'm a runner. That would keep me from jogging around the block, right? So that's all behavior is belief driven. All of a sudden one person does it and then dozens of people start. Now we have high school students breaking a 4-minute mile, right? Because there's a change in belief. My thing when I saw you from this perspective, some of you went 25, 50% further with the same amount of effort. What if you could go 25, 50% further in your impact, in your influence, in your income, right? With the same amount of effort. Where's the belief? Because there's something in psychology called learned helplessness. And learned helplessness basically states, well, a metaphor would be an elephant. You ever wonder why that big, amazing animal doesn't just leave? Because it's tied to this little, this rope to a little stake in the ground. It could pull down the whole circus tent, but it doesn't. Why? Because since it was born, it was tied to that same rope, to that same stake in the ground. And for the first few days, the first few weeks, it tried to get its sovereignty and its freedom, and it pulled and pulled and pulled, but it was so small, right, physically, and it couldn't get away. But even as it grown into this incredible, incredible beast, it still, and it could pull down anything, it still doesn't, because in its mind, it learned it was helpless. And what I'm saying is, when did we learn where the cap was in our potential, right, in our abilities, in our things? It's not fixed. We've discovered more about the human brain in the past 20 years than the previous 2,000 years. And what we found is we're grossly underestimating our own capabilities, right? Your intelligence, your memory, for instance, and your potential is not fixed like your shoe size, right? There's neurogenesis, neuroplasticity. The idea is that you could create new brain cells to the day you die. That neuroplasticity is saying you could create more connections. And you know what's key for that? Novelty and nutrition. Novelty and nutrition, because it's like your physical muscles. If you want to grow a muscle, you give it novelty, you give it, you exercise it, and then you give it nutrition to be able to feed it. Same thing with your mental muscles. I like to help people become more mentally intelligent and have facts, figures, foreign languages, everything at their mental fingertips. That's amazing. And I'd rather have you be mentally fit. So mental intelligence and mental fitness. Where I went into the office the other day, and I picked up the phone. I was the first one there. And this woman's like, I love you, I love you, I love you. I'm like, whoa, who's this? And she was like, I found it. And have you ever come up with a password or a hiding place that was so clever that you don't even remember what it is? She was given from her grandmother a family heirloom, a necklace, and it was hers to cherish. So it didn't go to her mom. It didn't go to her 3 sisters. She was there to protect it, right? And she hid it somewhere in her home, and she forgot where she put it. Right? And for 3 years, she thought it was lost, it was stolen. She had so much grief and shame around this. She was given so much, hassle from her family. But after going through our online program, she woke up 2 o'clock in the morning. She ran down 2 flights of stairs, went to the basement, went behind the boiler, pulled out a what? The necklace. And I was like, well, we didn't train you on how to find misplaced items. She was like, I don't know what it is. It's like, I'm remembering names. I'm not even using your technique. I feel like my brain is 20 years younger. Thank you for giving me my mind back. Right? But that's mental fitness, right? Just people who are more physically fit, even if you're not using the strategies, you are more capable, you have more energy, you have more flexibility, more agility, and so on, right? So we're going back here, that's the power of belief. Like if you go, I'm not gonna take the time here, but if you search my name on YouTube, you'll see me have 100 people stand up, and they'll have them introduce themselves to everyone else in the room, and then I'll remember every single one of their names. Right? I'll have people, an audience typically like this size, give me 100 numbers or 100 words, and I'll memorize them forwards and backwards and in and out of order. But after I do that, I always tell, I'm only, because of the time I have here, because I only have a handful of minutes left, I want to teach you how I do it. But the reason why I do it is not to impress you. I do it to express to you what's really possible, because the truth is, every single one of you could do that and a whole lot more. Your family could do that a whole lot more. Your team could do that and a whole lot more. And really, the most underutilized resource that you have in your organization is the collective brain power of your teams, right? To be able to out-focus, out-think, out-create, out-remember things. And memory is important even though you have digital devices, because I could prove it to you. You're like, well, I have Google. Why do I need to remember all these facts? If you lost half of the knowledge you know, how effective would you be? If you've lost half of the words, half of your expertise, half of the people you know, how effective would you be? You wouldn't, right? But if you could double that potential, how much more effective, productive, efficient would you be, right? And so that's why memory. I believe 2 of the most costly words in business are I forgot. I forgot to do it. I forgot that conversation. I forgot what to say. I forgot to bring it. I forgot that name, whatever it is. Every time you say that to yourself, you lose time, opportunity, income, and everything else that's important to you. So going back to this, the power of belief, right? When I do those demonstrations, I want to be that Roger Bannister for people because I grew up with the severe learning disabilities. Teachers would have to explain things 4, 5, 6 times to me. I still wouldn't understand. It took me 4 years longer to learn how to read. So it's very, very difficult upbringing. My mother became a special education teacher because she didn't know how to help me. So it's very difficult times, right? And so I never want people to struggle the way that I struggled. But it starts with believing that you could do it, right? Because if you believe you can, either way you're right. Now going back to this, the E in Be Fast stands for exercise, exercise. And I don't mean physical exercise, although people who are more physically active will always do better on mental acuity, focus, and memory tests, right? Because what's good for your heart is going to be good for your head, right? What's good for your heart is good for your head. And so oxygen flow and so on. But I mean practice, right? Because practice makes what? Progress, right? Practice makes progress. Practice makes permanent. So you want to practice this because knowledge is not power, it's potential power. But going to the FAST, F-A-S-T, these are the 4 keys to learning any subject or skill faster, really fast. The F stands for forget. Forget. And you're like, Jim, why would I want to forget? This is a memory class. What do you want to forget? I would say if you want to learn a subject or skill faster, doesn't matter if it's Mandarin, marketing, martial arts, music, whatever you want to learn, first forget what you already know about it temporarily. Because you got to empty your cup, right? So you can put something new in. Because your mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's what? When it's open, right? The other things I would say to forget, number 2, forget about situational things. We talked about how multitasking is a myth. If you're thinking about the kids and the work and the clients, you can't split your focus 4 ways because that only gives you 25% of your potential. We talked about the power of presence with President Clinton. You got to be present, right? Or you're only putting 25% of your resources. So forget about that. And how do you do it? Just write it down, right? Because what you resist persists. If you try not to think about it, you're going to think about it more. But the third thing I would say, forget about your limitations temporarily, what we talked about before. And I did a whole episode, it's called Kwik Brain, K-W-I-K Brain, our podcast. I did a whole episode on how to change your beliefs in 10 minutes, right? How to change your negative self-talk. I remember I was running a marathon. My very favorite marathon was in the Marine Corps marathon in D.C. And I was preparing, it was my first run. And there was a chapter in this book I was studying on the psychology of it. And it said this, it said this verbatim, because I'm a memory expert. It said, your brain is like a supercomputer, and your self-talk is a program that will run. So if you tell yourself you're not good at remembering names, you will not remember the name of the next person you meet because you program your supercomputer not to. Is that powerful? I always tell people this: your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk. Your mind is always eavesdropping on your self-talk. So you want to keep that very, very positive, right? So going back to belief. But when we're coming back to this, forget about your limitations, is stop saying, I'm forgetful, or always put yet at the end. I don't have a great memory yet, right? Because those words are power. The A in fast is active, meaning this: 20th century education was cookie cutter, one size fits all, assembly line for an assembly age, right? And it was based on you consuming information, sitting there and just being lectured to. But the human brain doesn't learn through consumption, it learns through creation and creativity. And here's the thing, you have to be more active. And so I did a whole episode, how can you be more active in learning? Asking questions, taking better notes. One of the most downloaded episodes is how to take notes, because most people take notes the wrong way. And if you want to take notes better, that's an incredible episode to be able to listen to. But that's being active. Because here's the thing with learning. Learning is not a spectator sport. Learning is not a spectator sport. The S and T in FAST, and I'll wrap with this. The S stands for state. State. And what do I mean by that? I mean the mood of your mind and body. You want to know what the key to memory is? Do this. Do this with me. Say this with me. Information. Do this. Put your hand out. Information. This is the active part. Information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. One more time. Information combined with emotion becomes a long-term memory. Now, here's the thing. You can prove it's true. You don't remember information. It's forgettable. But I guarantee you, how many people here, there's a song you can listen to, and it'll take you back to when you were a teenager? Because information combined with emotion became a long-term memory. How many people, it's a fragrance or a food? It could take you back decades, right? Because information combined with emotion taps into your long-term memory. So what do I mean by state? What was the primary state you were in when you were in school? What did you primarily feel? Boredom, right? Half the class is bored, the other class is confused, right? But on a scale of 0 to 10, what's boredom? 0, right? So information combined with emotion, what's anything times 0? 0, and you wonder why you forget, right, this information. So all learning, this is what you want to remember, all learning is state dependent. All learning is state dependent. And you want to put yourself in a more active, curious state, because who controls your state? You do, right? You're a thermostat. I remember I got to introduce two of my superheroes together over dinner. It was Richard Branson and Stan Lee. And I'm a big superhero nut, right? Stan Lee. Who did he create? Spider-Man, X-Men, Avengers, Fantastic Four, right? And we were in the car, and I asked Stan, I was like, who's your favorite superhero you created? And he says, Jim, it's Iron Man. And I was like, who's your favorite? I said, Spider-Man, because he had a big Spider-Man tie. And I was like, when I said Spider-Man, he said, Jim, with great power comes... And you all know that, right? And I have dyslexia, right? I have these learning disabilities, and I reverse everything. And I heard it differently. I was like, you're right, Sam. With great power comes great responsibility. And the opposite is also true. With great responsibility comes great power. When we take responsibility for something, we have great power to make things better, right? But most people, especially, they avoid responsibility because they value their freedom. But how many people here would like to do what they want, when they want, with who they want, for as long as they want, right? But discipline, if you can't get yourself to do the things you need to do, then you lose your freedom. So for me, discipline equals freedom, right? Because it frees you to do the things that you need to do. And I think the most important thing to discipline is how you feel, is set the thermostat and not wake up. If you walk out with anything out of this conversation, is turn the nouns into verbs. Like, you don't have love, you do love. You don't have creativity, you do creativity. You don't have focus, you do focus. You don't have a memory, you do a memory. It's a process. And when you turn it in from a have, you don't wake up and like, I hope I have focus today. That doesn't work, right? But if you have a process, then it works, right? And what I do is I like to take the method and show you the magic, because I believe genius leaves clues. That when somebody is successful in any area, you could be just as successful because they leave clues on how they do it if you're willing to look for the method behind the magic. But it starts with controlling your state, right? And finally, the T in FAST stands for teach. Teach. How many people would learn something better if they had to teach it tomorrow? Would you have better focus? Would you take notes better? Would you ask better questions? I would say that if you want to learn faster, learn with the intention of teaching it to somebody else. Right? And you like to start somewhere, I would offer you this, is you could just go to our site. There's nothing to buy. It's called QuickBrain, kwikbrain.com, and you can download all these episodes for free for you, your family, your teams, and everything. In 10 minutes, you can learn these things every single day, and it'll give you the ultimate edge. And I'll leave you with this. I believe your life is like an egg, that if an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. But if it's broken by an inside force, life begins, right? And all great things begin on the inside. And you have greatness inside of you, you have genius inside of you, and now is the time to let it out. Thank you very much.